Welcome to today's webcast, Balancing the Need for Quick Wins Against a Strategic Vision in Digital Transformation, sponsored by Capriza. I'm Jess Bozzo, and I'll be your moderator. Before we get started, I'll cover a few features of the console. On the left-hand side, you'll be able to view slides and polling questions during the webcast. You'll also be able to download a PDF version of today's slides by clicking on the link in the resource list icon area. You'll also see a link to upcoming in-person events from Argyle. You can learn more about our upcoming CFO events by clicking on the link. We invite you to ask questions at any time during today's webcast in the Q&A area of your console. We've set aside some time to address your questions following today's presentations. You'll also have the opportunity to earn a certificate for 1 CPE credit. To be eligible, you must respond to all 3 polling questions that we'll have throughout the webcast, as well as remain on the line for the duration of today's webcast. Afterwards, if you're eligible to receive credit, you'll be able to click on an icon to download the certificate located in the certification section. Now it is my distinct pleasure to welcome today's featured speakers. First up, we have Diane Hagglund, Principal Researcher with Dimensional Research. Dimensional Research is a research firm focused on gaining a deep understanding of how technology is used to drive business outcomes. Diane spends her days working with technology and business stakeholders to understand the real-life challenges and outcomes of technology innovations. Diane brings tremendous expertise with applications and infrastructure, as well as many years of experience working alongside the individuals who purchase and use this technology. Also on the line today, we're excited to have Simon Berman, Vice President of Products with Capriza. Simon is responsible for Capriza's product marketing and is passionate about bringing products to market and developing and growing the business. He brings over 20 years of product marketing and management experience in enterprise mobility, IoT, and application and network testing. Prior to Capriza, he held the product marketing efforts at Jasper and has led product teams at AtHoc and Mercury. I'll now turn things over to Diane to start us off. Welcome, Diane. Over to you.
Well, thanks so much, Jess. Hello, everyone. It is an absolute pleasure to be here with you today to introduce the findings from our recent research study investigating trends in digital transformation and financial approvals among both IT and finance stakeholders. So before we get into the good data stuff, let me tell you a little bit about what it is I'm going to be sharing with you today. We just completed this study, which is based on an online survey that was sent to independent stakeholders in IT and finance roles. We had over 400 qualified people complete the survey, each one of which had decision-making responsibilities for either processes requiring financial approvals or the applications and system used to manage approvals, and often both of those things. So who was it who participated in this study? We had an even mix of IT and finance roles, from large companies starting at 2,500 employees and going up from there. A good mix of job levels that allowed us to analyze some differences between executives and other people in their organization, as well as a good mix of industries so we could represent what was going on. So now that I've told you what we've done, let's get into the good stuff. So we wanted to understand what was happening in terms of digital transformation, particularly when you compared the finance organization to the IT organization. And I do want to say that I am old enough to remember the day when IT was a kind of a silo that just gave you your technology and said, here, use it, and left, right? And clearly we're past those days. There's been a lot of movement in terms of IT really partnering with the business to deliver the goods they needed, plus the business stepping up and understanding a lot of the things that the technology organization needed in order to deliver solutions. So we wanted to understand, though, given all that, when you look at something as cutting edge as a digital transformation initiative, these organizations are bringing different awareness of technology, of market trends, of business processes, of competition, of priorities, as well as, different ideas, different timelines. And we wanted to understand, when people think about digital transformation, are they thinking the same thing? Are they not? And so we started with a really basic question, which is, when you think of a typical digital transformation initiative or project for the finance organization, what's the timeline that comes to mind? Because that can be a real indicator of what's going on, how strategic, how important, how complex the project is. And we saw a real disconnect between the finance and IT teams when we asked this question. Your typical finance person is thinking about months or years. If you look at the green and the blue parts on this top bar, that adds up to more than 2/3 of finance professionals are thinking, yeah, less than a year, maybe a year, but not too long. Whereas IT, on the other hand, is mostly at the other end of the spectrum in the, orange, red, and mostly purple boxes here of saying, yeah, digital transformation, we're talking 2 years or more. This is a long, complex project. So these two organizations are bringing fundamentally different expectations to the table when they're thinking about what digital transformation means. Now, that said, when we ask a different question, we see that they are in agreement. And so we wanted to understand, if you're thinking about these big transformative projects, or you're thinking about maybe some simple things that can be done quickly with the technology, which of those is going to have the biggest impact on your finance team in terms of outcomes? And we see that for both finance and IT, there's agreement that these quick win digital transformations are going to be most impactful to the organization. And so in spite of the fact that there's disconnect on what a digital transformation project is, there is agreement that there's a real need to, deliver technology that's going to have a big impact and it's going to deliver that fast. So if you're interested in this, I would encourage you to read the entire research report. We dug a lot more into the topic of digital transformation with these audiences. I know we're making that report available to everyone on the call today. But I want to change topics now. And we introduced this idea of quick win in the study. And so we wanted to drill down on a potential area of quick wins, which is financial approvals. As we get into this, I do want to make sure that in the study we did define the term approvals as being financial-related approvals, purchase orders, purchase requests, invoices, expense reports, and so on, as well as revenue-related approvals, sales orders, timesheets, and so on. So we did really have a very tight definition of approvals for this study with our audience. And we wanted to understand, what's the opportunity to do better here? What's happening with it? Are there problems? Are there challenges? And the first thing that came out is that this is a pretty complicated area for most IT and finance organizations. We see there's complexity in a bunch of different vectors. The first of those vectors is just there's a lot of people involved in approvals. This, of course, will have some variability in terms of the type of approval and the organization that's approving and so on. But in general, we wanted to get a sense of, about how many different individuals get part when you have an approval of any level of significance. And the answer is, a lot. For 90% of people, it's more than one. And for many of them, it's 4, 5, even more than 5. And so there's a lot of people who were involved in financial approvals. We're also seeing that there's a lot of different systems and applications involved. If we ask about how many different applications or systems does your typical executive or maybe senior manager have to use in order to perform approvals, we see that the answer is, again, a lot. For 9 out of 10 companies, they're saying, well, more than one for sure. And especially if you look at the largest companies, those with 5,000 employees or more, about half are saying, yeah, there's 4 or more different systems and applications that are involved in order to perform approvals, which of course adds complexity. That means there is those different places where each manager has to be trained, has to access, has to go into in order to be responsive with approvals overall. So unsurprisingly, we see that these approvals take significant time. And again, this can vary by the complexity of what's going on. But if you think across what it takes to do an approval, which, that last step of clicking the approval button to say okay is not the time-consuming part. It's about, okay, you have to receive your notification. You have to, follow that, perhaps connect to a VPN, log on, remember your password, figure out in the layout of that particular application where the information you needs are, ask any questions, and so on. And this typically takes, for 3 out of 5 companies, 5 minutes or more for an approval. So we see across these vectors, there's a lot of people involved, there's a lot of systems involved, and there's a lot of time involved overall. So we see a really complex situation with this idea of approvals, which the idea itself is, not that complicated. Now, on the flip side, this is important, and we wanted to ask just a really simple question, which is how important is it that these approvals happen in a timely manner? And the first thing you see as you look at this graph is that there is absolute 100% agreement that it is important. We had 0 people. There's not even a teeny little red bar here in the not important section of individuals who said that, you know what, it's not important that this is timely. This matters. It really is just a question of how much it matters. Here we see a little bit of difference where among finance teams, exactly half of them are saying it not only matters, it matters critically, and then the remainder are mostly in this vary. Whereas IT people were more like, about 20% are saying it's critically important. But still, this is something that is very important to these organizations. So given the importance of timely approvals to these organizations, it was really surprising to us to find out that in spite of the importance, it is a fact of life that it is necessary to follow up with people in order to gain these approvals. Only 1% of people, this tiny little green bar on the left-hand side, are saying, you know what, our approvers always act right away. We really don't have to follow up. It just doesn't happen. For 99% of people, they're saying, oh, yeah, we got to follow up. We got to nag people. We have to remind them. We have to say we're doing this. With many people being here in that, purple box saying it happens frequently, or the red box even saying, you know what, the majority of our approvals require reminders. People have to be nagged. We have to get them to do their, we have to really get on their radar in order for them to do this, approval that we need them to do in order to do our jobs and move forward with the business. So I'm going to pause for a moment, and I actually do have a polling question for this audience. I'm curious to see how this audience compared to our own audience when we asked about who are the worst offenders when it comes to needing follow-up. So if you want to take the time, Jess, I'll pass this to you, and while we investigate what the audience on our webinar today thinks about this topic.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Diane. As Diane just mentioned, this is our first polling question. This one says, in your experience, what type of approving manager is most likely to need a reminder that they have approvals pending? The answer options for this question are executives, mid-level managers, or frontline staff. We'll ask that you please take a few moments to select your answer. A friendly reminder for those attendees seeking credit for today's webcast, you'll need to answer all 3 polling questions. We'll leave this question up for just a few more seconds to allow everyone to respond. Once we close this question down, we'll share the results and have Diane make a few comments before moving on. So please go ahead and make your final selection here. And what we'll do now is go ahead and share the results. Diane, here they are. Over to you.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We actually see some great agreement among this audience about who is the worst offenders, and the people on the webinar today are thinking it is executives, which is very similar to what happened with our survey audience. It varied a little bit. If we looked at the responses by job level, and of course we don't have that data with the participants on the webinar to do that kind of analysis, but I'm thinking maybe there's a lot of executives on this call, because among executives, they were very likely to say, you know what, we are the worst offenders. We know it. It's our people who are the ones who are holding up these approvals and slowing everyone down. So we see some real consistency there. So to wrap up my time today before I pass it to Simon, I want to spend some time really diving in and trying to gain a deep understanding of, what is going on with these existing approval processes? What is causing people pain? What's the impact of that? And most importantly, what can be done better, and how is that going to help if we can do that? So I'll share a few findings from our study with you. And the first is that it's very clear that the existing approval process processes do have issues. The specific issues range a lot. Finance people are most likely to say we have problems because we have so many logins for all these systems we use, or that we have so many steps if you think of the VPNs, credentials, etc. IT is more likely to say, we have issues because we have a lot of places where approvals have to be done, email, within the application, mobile apps. There's a lot of moving parts, or that these approval requests are easily mixed. But what there is complete agreement on is that there are challenges with these approval processes. Now, technology often has challenges with it, and so we wanted to understand, well, is there a impact of these challenges? What's going on? I think everyone on this call can appreciate that moment when you are pushed an update to your mobile device and all of a sudden something doesn't work right and you have to take a few minutes to figure out what option changed that you have to reset to get back to the life you want, right? Which is really an irritation more than it is a fundamentally impactful thing. Well, we see approvals is not like that. There probably is a certain level of irritation to poor approval processes, but there is a really direct financial impact to these complex and difficult processes, whether it's from, new employees are just sitting around while they can't work because they can't access their business systems, to perhaps losing a pre-negotiated early payment with discounts that have been lost, or needing to compensate employees because their expense reimbursements have been delayed so long they've incurred interest charges on their credit card, or so on, all across the board. As I was preparing for this webinar, the second option here about prospective customers being lost really rang true with me, because just this Monday, Dimensional approached one of our vendors who we we're having success with, and we needed to increase our license. So we just reached out to our account representative and asked, can we have a quote on this? We want to move forward, increase our licensing on this. It is now Thursday, and as of the start of this webinar, we have not been able to move forward because our quote has not been approved, the one that we agreed on with our sales manager, and so we're beginning to look at other options. So it is a practical thing that customers can be lost if these approval processes throw out, as do not work well as we're experiencing this week. So we wanted, and I know Simon's going to go a little bit more into the potential places where we can save time, but we did in this research want to understand and get some kind of sense about the scope of the benefit if we could do approvals better, if they're consolidated, if they're easy to do, if they're simpler for the approving managers. Is the impact, maybe minutes, a week? Is it a small impact? Is there something with the potential for very large impact? And we see that among the survey participants, they're saying, this is going to be pretty big. If we think about just the amount of time a typical manager might save, in a week, if they're not dealing with some of these complicated approval issues, more than half are saying, I think a manager would save more than an hour a week, which, of course, multiplied across all the approving managers in your organization. And normally the approvers are, not your least expensive human resources in your organization. That can be significant savings. We also see that there can be a business impact across a wide range of other factors within the organization, things like better compliance, increased user engagement and productivity, finance, saving time, chasing down these approvals, doing all these reminders that we saw happened all the time. And in fact, if we look at this slide, I want to draw your attention to that very bottom 2%. Only 2% of people felt that there would be no direct business impact by doing this better. The vast majority, 98%, are saying, this is an area that could have a real business impact. So for today, this is what I'm going to leave you with. Again, as I mentioned, the report with all of the information about what we did, the questions we asked, the participants, more information on the methodology of this study as well as the findings are available in the report that I know we'll be sharing with everyone on this audience. But I do want to just kind of highlight how we started this presentation by talking about digital transformation and how quick wins make digital transformation work, that there really seems to be a real opportunity with financial approvals to just do a better job if it can be done easily in a quick win way. So with that, I will pass it to Simon, who's going to talk about some of the things Capriza can help do to make this a good quick win project. Simon.
Thank you, Diane. And good afternoon, good morning to everyone. So for this second part of the webinar, I want to take over from where Diane left off and take a closer look at corporate financial approvals, why they're so problematic, and how we can solve many of the issues that she referenced in her research with a new approach to solving this. I'm sure that most of you as managers or executives have to deal with approvals on a daily basis. It could be a purchase order, a purchase requisition, an invoice, an employee expense, time off requests, service timesheet to bill a customer, and the list goes on and on and on. And I'm sure every organization has dozens of these different processes, no matter their business or their size or the industry that they're in. And they'll typically be coming from multiple different business applications. For example, it could be an ERP system, a procurement system, an expense management system, and so on and so on. Now, approvals are needed for good reason, mainly for reasons of corporate compliance, so that the checks and balances are all in place to ensure that processes are adhered to and well regulated. But the fact of the matter is that they are a burden to most companies simply because the way they are handled really hasn't changed in decades, and the current approach is so painful. And there are two angles that I wanted to focus on today. The first is from the individual manager or executive perspective in terms of the time that they spend actually doing the approvals, and Diane alluded to this before. And the second is the overall time it takes for approvals to kind of make their way through the system, go through the entire cycle so that the job can be done, in whatever that particular request is. So let's start with the individual managers. And as we all know, each application has its own credentials. Each requires the user to be on the network. Normally it's a laptop or a large desktop. The workflows are all different. They're pretty cumbersome. And they can require navigation across many different screens just to get to the task at hand. And if you think about it, managers and execs are your high-value employees, yet they spend an inordinate amount of time, on the go, on the weekends, out of the office, dealing with these approvals. And most executives will kind of roll their eyes when they think about the next 2 hours that they have to do just to sit down and clear up any open approvals. And I'm sure most of us would agree that it's not the best use of their time when they should or could be focused on more strategic activities. So in this slide, you can see some examples of the complaints that we hear all the time from these individuals. You have multiple usernames and passwords for each of the applications, and some of those applications are used so infrequently you don't even remember those credentials. Emails notifying you of a pending approval, which gets lost in the clutter. You don't even know people are waiting for you, which is one of the common objections. You don't remember how to navigate the different workflows of the applications because you do them maybe once a month or once a quarter. Or you're out of the office and you need to boot up your laptop. You have to get on the VPN and the corporate network and so on and so forth. So it's an entire rigmarole just to get these things done. Now, we heard from Diane that over 60% of the time, an approval can take between 5 and 10 minutes to perform. That's a single individual approval. Now, although that might not seem like a big deal, I think it helps to kind of take a broader perspective and look at this across the entire organization, where there are, where these are happening every day, hundreds, if not thousands of them, as part of any healthy operating business. So I've put together a very simple model. It's not meant to be a math lecture, but you'll see a little equation in a second, that aims to capture the accumulative time spent doing approvals by managers and executives across the organization. So we're going to use E as the number of employees in the company, M, the number of employees per manager, R will be the number of requests per month that an average manager gets, and T is the number of minutes it takes to perform a single request approval. And here you can see a simple equation. It's 12 times ERT over 60M. You can take my word for it, and I'll point you to the blog if you want to read up more about it later on. So that's really the simple model for determining the total amount of spend. So let's do a really simple example. We use hopefully some very realistic numbers. So if we take a company with 5,000 employees, a manager-employee ratio of 1 to 8, assume 20 approval requests a month per manager, which is really about 1 a day. And as Diane alluded to before, let's assume it takes 5 minutes for the manager to go through those steps to do the actual approval. So if you put those numbers in, you get to no small number. It's 12,500 hours per year spent by managers and executives doing approvals. Now, to put that into perspective, that's the equivalent of the work time of 6 full-time employees over the course of a year. So it's no small, number, this accumulative time spent, time waste, and we call this a kind of operational drag. And there's a link down there for a more comprehensive blog that kind of elaborates on all of that. And I should also point out, if you're interested in kind of plugging in these same numbers for your organization, then on our website we have an interactive calculator. You can kind of use the knobs and dials to select your own values and kind of spit out the same numbers using exactly the same formula. But here's the real problem, which is, from a company or a business perspective, what does it mean? What's the impact? So if we look at the individual requests that are being submitted that need to be approved, it's not uncommon for end-to-end approval cycles to take days or even weeks to go through the approval chain of command, so to speak. And Diane reeled off a whole set of business pain points that are as a result of that. Late fees, lost prospective customers, delayed expense reimbursement to employees after the fact POs, and the list goes on and on and on. And again, suggest everyone read the report to get all of that information in more detail. So let me give you another example. So a purchase order, every business deals with hundreds or thousands of them in any given month. And as we heard before, it's not uncommon that there might be 4 or 5 approvers along the way. It could be, the first approver could be a financial analyst who maybe does a sanity check to ensure that all the information is correct, all of the attachments are in place, it's abiding by corporate policy. Once that's approved, it then advances to the requester supervisor, and then maybe onto a regional VP, and then maybe even up to the CFO, obviously depending on the delegation of authority and the size of the PO. Now, the primary means to notify managers and executives today of a pending approval is via email, right? These the typical systems have auto-generated emails that trigger, the notification to the user. Now, the problem is that the average manager today receives over 100 emails, and so it's understandable that most of the time these emails are just simply lost in the inbox. So what it means is that the clock is ticking, and most of these managers and executives don't even know they're on the hook to approve something until it's too late. People are dispatched to kind of hunt them down and give them a friendly reminder, or maybe not so friendly reminder, to take care of an approval. And of course, executives are typically traveling; they're on the go, and they're on the road, and it makes it all the more problematic. And that's why I think so much manual labor is wasted by finance teams, where you've got folks, literally chasing people down to bug them to take care of a specific approval. And I've even heard of cases where executives feel so bad for being the bottleneck that they just blindly approve the request without really reviewing it. And that kind of defeats the purpose of having the approval in the first place. Jess, over to you for another quick polling question.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Simon. As Simon just mentioned, this is our second polling question of the day. This one says, how would you grade your current financial approval cycles in terms of speed and efficiency? The answer options for this question are excellent. We are a model of efficiency. Good, we get things done, but there's room for improvement. Fair, we can do a lot better. Poor, it's a wonder we get anything done. Or fail, nothing ever gets done. Just like the last question, we'll ask that you please take a few moments to select your answer. Friendly reminder for those attendees seeking credit for today, we'll need to answer all 3 polling questions. This is our second one. We'll leave this question up for just a few more seconds to allow everyone to respond. Once we close this question down, we'll share the results and have time to make a few comments before moving on. So please go ahead and make your final selection here. And what we'll do now is go ahead and share the results. Simon, you're there. I'll turn things over to you.
Okay, so looking at the results, again, very supportive of what we're seeing in the broader market, which is most people recognize at the end of the day, we can get things done. Might not be particularly efficient. We might be leveraging workarounds and backdoors, manual labor, and so on. We do get things done, but there's always room for improvement. So great. So what I'm going to talk about in the second part now of this session is really, what can you do about it? What can you do about accelerating slow approvals, bringing some more agility to the organization, and extracting some of these inefficiencies in the operational processes? So, so what if there was a means that you could streamline the way these corporate approvals are being done so that managers and execs could make an informed decision quickly and easily wherever they are, using the smartphones that they all have in their pockets, high compute devices that are always on, always connected, always accessible. And that's really where we come in at Capriza with our solution, which we call Approve Simple. And it's essentially tailored for streamlining these corporate approval processes. And the approach we take, which is very unique, is to consolidate all of the different kinds of approvals from all of these different applications on the back end, and to present them in a simple, normalized, uniform way to the manager or exec on their smartphone or tablet. So whether you have an SAP or an Oracle Azure ERP system, or if you're using Ariba or Coupa for your procurement system, or you have maybe a Concur for your expense management system, it really doesn't matter. In fact, it doesn't even matter if the applications are on the cloud, if they're legacy, if they're off the shelf, if they're customized, homegrown, and so on. And we have an approach that allows us to do this, to deliver on this promise at a very, very quick speed, typically in the order of magnitude of just a few weeks. So by way of example, let me show you some screenshots that hopefully illustrate the end user experience. So first, you'll notice that the user no longer needs to rely on emails for the notification and will rely on native push notifications. Of course, this is both persistent and it's also accessible from the phone's notification center. And that means that the manager has literally a single swipe, is always a swipe away from the number of pending approvals that they have in their queue. In fact, the simpler approval requests, things like time off requests, where maybe the manager's already spoken to the employee in advance, was being given a heads up that this is coming, they can actually deal with that approval there and then from the notification itself. Now, if we go to the app itself, you'll also note, it's a bit smaller, but there's a number 7 on top of in the badge there. And badge notifications are an indication, again, to the manager of how many outstanding approval requests are currently in their queue across all of these different systems. And as simple as it looks, it's almost impossible today for a manager to really know at any given time how many approvals they have coming in from all of these different systems. Now, as the user clicks on the icon and brings up Approve Simple, they're greeted with this kind of mini dashboard that breaks down all of those pending approval types, pending approvals by the types. So in this case, you can see there are 2 POs, there's 1 invoice, 2 expense reports, and so on and so on. And then by clicking on any one of them, it brings up this native carousel metaphor that allows the user to quickly swipe to the appropriate approval type, review just the right amount of information they need in order to make a business decision. In this case, for an invoice, you can see the manager can swipe down, and they can see an audit trail of the approvals in this particular queue, who has approved it up until now, who's after me, and so on and so forth, along with things like timestamps and whatnot. And of course, they can actually click on the attachment itself of in this case, the original invoice, and then use native gestures like pinching and zooming to review the original doc. Similarly, if it's an expense report, they can view the individual items, receipts, for example. Or if it's a timesheet that's been submitted by an employee from a time tracking system, you can also see the hours tracked for each day before approving or rejecting. And of course, once each of those individual requests has been dealt with, the counter decrements, and they've got 1 less approval on the plate. So that's kind of from an end user perspective. Now, what you can see here are some examples of the different arms of the business and the key applications that we commonly work with Diane mentioned at during the survey part that most finance execs have 4, 5, 6 applications, of course, across the entire organization. There are many more. And so you can see here just some common examples. Obviously, from a finance procurement perspective, the ones on the top are the more common ones, Ariba, Coupa, Expensify, and so on. But our approach is really the same, and that is to leverage all of these different systems of record across the business. So, it could be HR for taking care of PTO requests, leaves of absence, or CRMs like Salesforce and NetSuite for sales discounts and so on. Or it could be ticketing systems for things like getting a new employee onboarded so they have access to certain applications, or give them a new laptop or a desktop and so on. And the list goes on, and you can see here some common examples. Now, as you can probably tell, there really are 3 key constituents who derive value from Approve Simple. The first, obviously, is being the end users themselves. Those are the approving managers across the organization that actually deal with the approvals. And for them, the value is really now that they have a single place to go to for all of their approvals, single login, single listing of all of the approval requests, without knowing or caring what those back-end applications are or where they are. They can now take care of all their approvals wherever they are, no VPN required, and no need to hunt down those cryptic auto-generated system emails that are coming from the back-end applications. From a finance perspective, it's really all about business agility and operational efficiency. So ensuring that the cycle times are cut down to the bare minimum. And as we saw before, this can have a material benefit from a financial perspective, such as cutting out late fees, or conversely taking advantage of early pay discounts, closing deals with prospective customers, collecting cash quicker. And it's also about freeing up time that finance typically have to spend chasing down those approvers who are simply unaware that they have approvals pending, and basically increasing people's productivity. Now, from an IT perspective, and just tying it back to Diane's introductory remarks, it's really all about providing the quick win and delivering quick value, but doing so in a non-disruptive way, which is also very valuable from an IT perspective. And as we heard before, both finance and IT can agree that these are critical for any digital transformation initiative. And with the ability to deploy within a few weeks using a cloud-based solution that complies with enterprise IT's security standards, this truly is the quick win that works for both business and IT. So what I wanted to do now is just give a couple of illustrative examples through a couple of customer stories. The first is with Volvo Financial Services. And for those of you who don't know, they are the financing arm of Volvo's trucking business. They operate in 44 different regions across Europe and Asia Pacific and the Americas. And as you can imagine, it's a very competitive market. People have lots of choices. And prior to using Capriza, the problem that they had was that the approving of financing terms for a prospect could take days, which obviously had an impact on their ability to close deals and remain competitive. It's just like, as a consumer, you go to the dealership, if they tell you to come back 4 days from now to issue you a quote, then obviously in that time you can quite happily take your business elsewhere. With Capriza, they're now able to significantly reduce that approval response time that was several days, now down to a matter of hours, and obviously win more business as a result and close deals quicker. The second example I want to give you is with RPC, which is a publicly held leader in oil field services. And when you're at a drill site, there's a tremendous amount of material that needs to be ordered. So it could include things like millions of pounds of sand, various pieces of specialty equipment, and so on. And at RPC, they use PeopleSoft ERP for managing their purchase orders, which are then issued and tracked for compliance and accurate forecasting. And Kent Lyon, who was their VP of Finance, told us a story where one of the district managers in a single month had over 800 POs to approve, which he calculated had taken over 30 hours to do. So we talked earlier about, maybe saving a couple of hours a week or a month. There's one guy had, in 1 month over 30 hours of approvals to do. And obviously when you're at a drill site, you've got really important work to do. So, of course, all of this approval work was done at the expense of family time downtime, evenings and weekends and so on. And with Capriza, our PC was able to reduce these PO approval cycle times by 75%. So this not only made the lives of the field managers much easier, but it also gave corporate finance the ability to, or that peace of mind from a financial compliance perspective. We're very fortunate to have many of the customers who are relying on us to streamline and consolidate their corporate approval processes, and you can see some more examples here, whether it be a MasterCard for the internal financial processing of hundreds of thousands of purchase recs, POs, and invoices, or Titan Machinery for quickly selling the inventory of their high-end tractors with the appropriate margins. And in summary, we believe that it's high time that people change the way they deal with corporate approvals, which again really haven't changed in years, if not decades. They're inefficient, they're slow, and they have a negative impact on the business. And what we found is that solving this is the proverbial quick win that both finance and IT are looking for on their digital transformation journey. If you'd like to test drive Approve Simple, you can download it for free at our website. Look, just click on the test drive button. And at this point, I'm going to thank everyone for your time and hand it back over to you, Jess.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Simon, for a super informative session today. What we're going to do now is go ahead and transition to our third and final polling question of the day. This one says, which of the following capabilities for simplifying and accelerating approvals would be valuable to your organization? The answer options for this question are simple, consistent user interface and workflow for all types of approvals, a single login for all types of approval systems, the ability to integrate with all of our applications, displaying the right amount of information to make an informed decision, consolidated list of all pending approvals from all systems, the ability to perform approvals on a mobile device, mobile push notifications alerting the new approval requests are pending, or none of these would be valuable. Please note that this question is multi-select, so we'll ask that you choose all that apply. You can scroll through to view all of the answers and then click the Submit button. Please take a few more moments to select your answers. Friendly reminder for those attendees seeking credit for today, this is our third and final polling question. We'll leave this question up for a few more seconds to allow everyone to respond. Once we close this question down, we'll share the results and have Simon make a few comments before we transition over to audience Q&A. So please do remember to submit your questions for both Simon and for Diane. Please go ahead and make your final selection or selections here. And what we'll do now is go ahead and share the results. Simon, here they are. I know we have quite a few answer options, so I'll give you a second to take a look over these before you share a comment or two.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Again, I think this resonates very nicely with the data in Diane's report. Good news is there's a solution out there that can help achieve these different capabilities and hopefully bring value to the audience. So please do take a read of the report, follow up with us, look at the test drive, and we're happy to see if we can help you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Simon. So what we'll do now, as I mentioned, is transition over to audience Q&A. Friendly reminder, you can still submit questions via the Q&A section of the interface. Simon, we could start with you here. This attendee writes, are there any common adoption issues that you see when it comes to moving to apps?
That's a good question. The biggest issue that we've seen in our experience is working with the various IT architecture and security teams. And I'll tell you why. Although most organizations have pretty much accepted, the cloud as a means to deploy new solutions, and you can say this across defense and financial services and health, industries where security is always top of mind. The InfoSec teams still need to do their architectural reviews and their assessments, and they kind of need to make sure that the third party is indeed abiding by all of their corporate, compliance policies, that the data is being handled responsibly, data at rest, data in motion, data on the end device. So we do spend a bit of time on that front to make sure that we're in compliance. And we didn't go into the technical details today, but obviously as an enterprise-grade vendor, there are many different certifications and compliance technologies and standards that you need to have, which we do. But I would say this, that the state now is much, much better than it was, say, 5 years ago. As I said, pretty much every organization today has adopted cloud. A good example would be, an HR system like a Workday, or a CRM system like a Salesforce or a NetSuite. So that would probably be the area where I would say that the common adoption issues kick in. I'm sure there are others as well, but that's off the top of my head, that's probably the first thing that comes to mind.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Simon, for your response there. Another question, this one says, if we already have mobile apps for some of our key applications, why do we need Capriza?
Another fair question. So most organizations have, as I said before, many different applications that power the business, not just in finance and procurement, but above and beyond, and that's typically a large number. So, and it's true that most of these applications, certainly the more modern ones, do have mobile apps that can give you access or partial access to the application functionality. But to be honest with you, there's really no difference between having managers perform their approvals on 6 or 7 different mobile apps as there are logging onto the desktop and logging into 6 or 7 different applications. In other words, they still have to install each and every app. Each one still has its own credentials. The app experience is going to be different. So it's the inconvenience factor is still there. And you've got to have multiple apps for each approval type. Our approach, as I said before, on the other hand, is really to view it as a one-stop shop for all things approval. So it's an entirely unified experience. We abstract away all of the complexities of the underlying applications. We normalize it. And so the mechanics of doing approval are really the same in Approve Simple, regardless of the back-end applications and systems. So, the speed factor, the convenience factor is what you get so that they can, make informed business decisions and get back to doing the important stuff. Jess, if I can, there's another question that just came in here that I'd like to address, which is: have you calculated the reduction of time for approvals before and after implementation? I think this question may have come in before I referenced the 2 case studies, but in both those, I gave some quantitative examples. I think it was 60 and 75% reduction in cycle times, which is obviously fantastic. I should also point out that time is one metric that I focused on, but there are many others as well. Obviously, it depends on the use case itself. So, in the case of Volvo Financial Services, their primary use case for approval was turning around, financing terms and conditions for a prospect in order to close deals faster. Obviously, if you're talking about, purchase orders and invoices, that's more of an internal factor, and, the key measurement might be mitigating the costs of late penalty fees, or conversely taking advantage of early pay schemes. So time is a very important factor, but I should also point out there are many other factors, and they kind of typically depend on the specific approval use case itself.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Simon. And this might be a good way to wrap up the Q&A session here. This attendee says, you mentioned the free trial download. What exactly do I get with that?
So it's the free trial download is what we call Test Drive. It's on pretty much every page of the website in the upper right-hand corner. What you get is a unlimited trial access to the mobile app itself, to the full functionality of Approve Simple. And it basically comes with some sample demo data, so it doesn't connect to any application, any of your applications. It connects to our demo application. And it kind of illustrates the end user experience for different kinds of approval types. And what we found is it's a great way of allowing people to socialize this experience internally within their organization, what's known as the art of the possible. So highly recommend people try it out. Again, it's free, it's not time bound, and it's a great way of sharing this new approach very easily and quickly.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Quick point to all of our attendees. I think we ran through all of the attendee questions for today, but if you have any additional questions, feel free to enter them in the Q&A section of the interface or in the post-event survey, and we'll be sure to share that with both Diane and Simon post-event so that they or someone on their team can follow up if it makes sense. Once again, we want to say a big thank you to both of our speakers today. So a big thank you to Diane and a big thank you to Simon for their engaging and informative sessions today. Once again, we want to thank everyone for joining us today for Balancing the Need for Quick Wins Against a Strategic Vision and Digital Transformation, sponsored by Capriza. We hope that you all enjoy the rest of your day.